You're listening to The Bird Bath. This episode of The Bird Bath is brought to you by the Bird Bath Terminal with our new API and MCP. If you're in vet med, M&A, or recruiting, or you sell into practices, you've got the spreadsheet. Somebody built it, somebody's supposed to be updating it, but you know what? Nobody is. The terminal is just that, but live. Every practice in the US, ownership down to the group, corporate versus local versus independent, doctor rosters, revenue estimates, acquisitions, openings, and closings as they happen. And you now don't have to come to us to use all this data. The API puts it inside of whatever you've already built. Sync ownership into your CRM so your reps see who's behind the corporate groups before they dial. Feed practice counts and revenue estimates into your model instead of retyping them. Hit it nightly and your pipeline updates itself. MCP is the same data with a different door. Point Claude at the terminal and just ask, which groups bought in Texas last quarter? Give me every 3-doctor practice in Nashville. It queries the live database and answers. No export, no reformatting, no analyst in the middle. Your team already knows what to ask. Give them the answers with the Bird Bath Terminal. Go to thebirdbath.io/terminal or click the link in the show notes for more information. Welcome back to the Bird Bath. Each week we scrape the surface of the news you need to know, so let's get into it. Top story this week has to be some hot water for the team over at Zoetis, a story that has been definitely making the rounds through a lot of social media and a lot of posts, and a lot of you sent it to me and said, Ryan, are you talking about this week? So let's get to the story here. Columbia Veterinary Hospital in Oregon has sued Zoetis in Wasco County Court. They're claiming at least $50,000 in damages. So what's going on? Here's the real story for it. In October of 2025, so last year, an 11-year-old dog came in with a fast-growing neck mass. The clinic ran all their samples through Zoetis' AI tool, which is the VetScan Imagist. It's a tool that I was there when they were launching it, had the chance to see it as it hit the market in the UK and then as it moved into the US. And it's something that's in a lot of practices. Well, the software within the Imagist flagged mast and spindle cell features, but then ultimately it called it an inflammatory lesion. The clinic took those results and operated based on that read. So obviously, you guys know I'm not a doctor, and I probably am getting in over my head, but the idea here is that the level of removal that they did was not as aggressive as it would have been had there been those mast and spindle cells present. Well, they sent the mass off, and the Oregon State University's diagnostic lab later confirmed that it was an aggressive cancer. The dog had to be brought in for a second surgery very quickly after, and complications from that second surgery unfortunately caused the death of the dog. So the family lost their pet, and Columbia Veterinary Hospital is the one filing suit. So it's not the owners, it's not the pet owner that's filing suit, but it's the veterinary clinic filing suit here. And they're saying, hey, you know this happened. You should have caught it. This was something we relied on your data to be able to move forward. So the suit that they read alleges that Zoetis apologized, admitted fault, and said that this had happened to other Imagist users. So it's kind of if it is true, if it all comes out to be fact, that's a tough one to come back from. The other difficult thing is some of the marketing language, talking about the Imagist being the most capable veterinary AI analyzer and some of the language around that. I know we talked about the marketing language around Brevecto Quantum and how that's been sort of a thing for Merck, and how people are saying, hey, if it's annual, it needs to be annual. If it's less than annual, it needs to be less than annual. So the worry here is, what is an AI analyzer? What can you trust? What can you really look at? So this is kind of crazy. It's definitely something that's going to be a hot button issue. Full transparency for anyone that's not aware. I have done work with the team from Zoetis, and really enjoy the team and the medical team over there and the diagnostic team over there. As you all know, I'm definitely not a vet, nor am I an AI analyst wizard here, but it brings up this kind and unique and interesting topic about like, where does the responsibility fall? Should the DVMs own the outcome? Are AI tools that a tool but need to be used in the hands of someone that understands how they work? So we'll see where this goes. If I was a betting man, I think it will go to a settlement out of court, and this will be the last we hear about it. But if it does proceed, I think it could be one of those stories that rewrite some of the important things around how AI is used within clinics. Now, flipping from AI back to the thing that has been driving a lot of this growth is the valuations and the sales of practices. So the Ackerman Group did their Q2 report last week, and it's always a great one. If you don't listen in or watch their webinar, at least read the highlights of it. The big thing that was really interesting was in the first half of 2026, the weighted average valuation was at a 13.4 times EBITDA, which is super high for where people are sort of feeling like the economy is. The Ackerman Group said 20 hospitals transacted with an average cash at closing at 8.7 times EBITDA, which is about 11 years of after-tax income. Now, Ackerman Group's CEO, Rich Lester, said the economic data says valuation should be higher. The industry data says they should be lower. What's happening is supply and demand. The 13.4x is carried by a small cohort of some really, really big practices. So we know larger practices, more revenue, trade for more because they're a much quicker turnkey, profitable revenue generating opportunity for the acquisition partners. Now, the flip side of that is those smaller practices are where you're starting to see things narrowed down. The Adequan Group says that those numbers have been flat for over 2 years. Corporate buyers are at a 7.5 to 15 times multiple for when they're purchasing practices, and associate buy-ins are at a 5 to 5.5% multiple. And that is really capped by what lenders will give them the money to be able to buy on, right? This is the story of how private equity came in with corporate money. If you're not borrowing the money from a bank, you can afford to pay more because you're the bank. If you're borrowing that money, the banks are going to limit what you can pay because they're only going to lend to a certain EBITDA multiple. The other thing in the report that I thought was pretty interesting was that this was the first time that general practice was leading buyer demand, with interest in especially in ERs cooling down. So it seems like we've maybe hit that saturation point for a lot of those specialty in ER clinics, and we're starting to see people maybe doing some of those in a de novo fashion or driving that business elsewhere. It's kind of an interesting story, right? If you're building a really, really spectacular business and still building a lot of value in that business, you're going to see a solid exit. But I think the days of having multiple offers for a small practice that needs massive amounts of work is probably behind us right now. Now, we never know what the future holds, but that's definitely something to keep in mind if you're looking at this. Golden Child, which is a premium pet food business, has named Connor Stastny as the CEO. It's a pretty big announcement here. Golden Child operated in stealth mode for quite a while before they did a big launch with their team. And now, just shortly after that, they have brought in a very, very, very successful CEO from the space, or from the DTC space. So Stastny was the president and CFO at Grooms, which is the gummy nutrition brand that Unilever bought for $1.2 billion last year, or actually earlier this year. Before that, he was in the C-suite at Bite, which is a DTC aligner company, so think dental, and that sold for over $1 billion just 24 months after launch. So the founding team here and this new CEO is trying to make something big happen very quickly, if I'm reading it here, right? They didn't bring in someone just from the pet space. They hired a guy who's taken 2 DTC brands to billion-dollar-plus exits and knows how to drive customer acquisition costs to be a really solid figure that people want to acquire. It's one of these places where industries continue to raise money, and it's very, very big, and a spot where a lot of dollars are still being spent outside of the veterinary clinic. So the team behind Golden Child, they've got people from Farmer's Dog, HelloFresh, Royal Canin, Purina, Pepperidge Farm. They've got a board certified veterinary nutritionist who I think is absolutely wonderful. Megan Sparkle is fantastic. And they also have a chef on their roster. So this is a company that is going for it big off the bat. And I think we'll expect to hear a lot more from them over the next, well, maybe even 24 months when they try to turn this for $1 billion+. So big news, and I think even bigger stuff coming. So welcome to the veterinary industry, Connor. Finally, a little bit of recall news. American Regent Animal Health has issued a nationwide voluntary recall for Adequan, both the canine as well as Adequan intramuscular for horses. So it's 2 lots. You guys can find the lot numbers because you're probably not going to write them down. Well, let's give them to you. 33669 and 25011. And then for the equine side of things, it's 24416 and 25265P. They found glass fibers in internally retained samples during testing. Now, I tried to find what number of doses or vials are part of this, but that's something that they have not disclosed. It's a number that shows up when the recall gets classified as not voluntary anymore. But the interesting thing was just how long this was. The first canine lots shipped in May of 2024. The next lots went out in April of 25, May of 25, and January of 26. So these have been out. They've been on people's shelves. And the thing is, it's probably more likely that these are not on people's shelves anymore, that they've already been injected and that these have already gone through. But it's important as well, if you do have some of these older lots sitting on your shelves, to know. So it can cause local irritation, swelling, injection site pain, infection, abscesses, but no adverse events have been reported. So pull the lots, return or discard them, and then really think about this. It's one of those things kind of interesting to think about how long this was prior to figuring out what's going on. I reached out to some people that care about inventory a lot in this space, and I thought this is kind of a cool way as we think about the intersection of data and in clinical life is if you're a PIMS and you're looking at people's inventory, or if you do inventory management software, or if you do other things that can read what's on people's shelves, this is that time to wow your customers, right? If I was a practicing veterinarian or a practice manager and I went into my office and opened up my PIMS or opened up my inventory system or opened up my ordering system and had a flag on the lots that were already remaining in my inventory, or just one letting us know, hey, nothing that we show in your inventory is here, flagged, letting us know there's problems, that would be awesome. I think you would wow customers. I think people would be really thrilled to see that. And this would be a really great opportunity to continue to prove that value for your customers. If you want more on these and other stories, join us by subscribing to our Substack. There's always a link in the bio. And don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing and rating the show. For the Bird Bath, I'm Ryan Leach. See you next week.